here. Fantastic. What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Let's make it happen Mondays. Hopefully you guys had a great weekend. And an awesome Mother's Day, by the way. Happy Mother's Day to all you mothers if you're listening, and to all those you have mothers. Hopefully you treated them well this weekend. My wife, we actually had a great weekend. My wife was actually super busy last week. She was traveling quite a bit, so she came home and didn't want to do anything. So we sat and watched movies all weekend, which was awesome because I needed the downtime too. But so yeah, that was our weekend, which was nice. It was my kind of Mother's Day. So anyways, but today with Make It Happen Mondays, I figured, as always, just ask questions, right? Hit me up on Facebook so I can answer whatever questions that you have. But as usual, kind of the long tail of this, the views after the fact are huge. And so, whereas kind of the people chiming in right now might not be a ton, but for those of you who do, please ask questions. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here to help. But today I figured I would just go through a rapid fire bunch of sales tips and nuggets and ideas for y'all to think about and things that you can do today that, that'll make a difference, hopefully. That'll make a difference for me. Because that's the way I've looked at sales training for a long time, just to kind of get some context here. You know, early in my career, when I was starting my first company, I was looking for the answer. And I was looking to say, okay, there's got to be somebody out there that, there's methodologies, right? There's Sandler, there's Miller Hyman, there's all these sales trainings out there that, okay, so they got the answer. And I would go to these trainings and I would try to say, okay, let me listen to absolutely everything that they have to offer here. And I would always walk out of there with a nugget or two, but like the whole thing just seemed like pretty excessive. It seemed like out of an entire day, for instance, they could have probably just cut that down to about an hour and just cut to the tips and the nuggets. And I would have gotten more out of it, actually, if they had done it that way. Same thing with books and shit like that on sales. It's, you have this 200-page book and you read the whole thing and you get one nugget. Oh, there's what I should put in a subject line. It's like, I have a hard time with that because I just think we need to cut through the bullshit and cut through the fluff. And so that's why a while back, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and you can still go check this out, by the way, I started an app called Sales from the Streets. So Sales from the Streets, go on the App Exchange, you can download it there. It's free. And the whole idea was crowdsource sales training, nuggets and tips from everybody out there, because you've all gone through the trainings, you've all read the books, we all pick our nuggets and tips out of those. So instead of having to go through a full day of training or read an entire book, why can't I just get that nugget from you? And that's what that concept of Sales from the Streets is. So if you go on there, there's probably about 100 plus tips on there. I didn't put a lot of focus on it after the fact, and so it's just kind of sat there doing nothing. I'm probably going to have to decommission it soon here just because of focal point standpoint, but go check it out. Let me know what you think. But really my whole mindset with sales is about getting to the damn point and some nuggets and tips and things that you can do today and not some big long theory or process about sales. So with that, ask your questions, but I'm just going to start firing off as many of the actionable tips that I can possibly share with you in the next 25 minutes or so. And so hopefully, those of you who are listening can start to do stuff today. And those of you going to watch this after the fact, can get a ton of value out of this session here. And if you do, all I'll ask is that you make a comment or two on the post and then, and share it out there just to try to help me build up this following. And also last point here, I'm going to be starting to light up Instagram here pretty soon. Same handle as my Twitter and Snapchat, John M as in Michael Barrows. But Instagram, I'm going to start screwing around with because I'm taking a vacation. I'm going to be talking about this next week. I'm taking a vacation starting the 24th, and I'm not coming back till the 9th. And this is going to be one of those vacations where leave me alone. I don't want to talk to anybody, but I will be doing some Snapchat and Instagram stuff, and mainly Instagram because it's going to be in Italy. It's going to be beautiful out there. So that's a perfect way to, I think, start off our Instagram approach here with everything else. All right. So anyways, let's dive right into the tips. Okay. First and foremost, I'm going to share my favorites. My absolute favorite is when, first of all, my least favorite thing for anybody to say out there is touching base and checking in. If you've been following me for a while now, you know that. Let's see, hold on. So the way to get rid of that is to start every single one of your conversations off with this phrase: the reason for my call is. All right, finish that sentence, because if you cannot finish that sentence, you should not be making the phone call. All right, it gives you a lot more confidence, and there's a psychological component to it as well. Here's another tip. Go read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini, Cialdini. It talks about the power of giving people reasons. It's not a book on sales, by the way. It's a book on psychology and why we do the things the way that we do them. And in there, it talks about giving people reasons. And when you give people reasons, they are more accepting for what you're about to tell them. And by the way, it gets to the point, which leads to effectively another tip here, which is there is a big difference between being direct and being rude. All right, fine line, but huge difference. We got to be as direct as possible without being rude. The reason for my call is being very direct, in my opinion, not being rude. And again, going back to being direct, I think we need to do a very good job at a better job at setting expectations. So here's another tip. I think expectation setting is absolutely critical in everything that we do. So from an expectation setting standpoint, I want to set that's why I use one of my favorite tips is a shared agenda to confirm and control meetings. So you and I have a meeting coming up tomorrow. Instead of sending you an email today saying, hey, are we still on for tomorrow, and getting the inevitable, sorry, John, we need to reschedule here, what I can do is, what I do is I send you an email saying, hey, I'm looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. In order to get the most out of our time together here, I put together a brief agenda. Could you please do me a favor and email me back to let me know if it's all accurate and if I missed anything? And in there, I usually put about 3 bullet points about what I want to talk about. Nothing too specific, just pretty basic, but just to guide the conversation. And then I leave 3 bullet points blank, effectively telling you fill in the blanks. If I get that email back from you with those blanks filled in, obviously I'm in for a great meeting. If I don't, that's okay, because the morning of the meeting, I update the meeting invitation with the agenda in there. So I don't put the agenda in the original invite, right? Because nobody ever looks at that. But I update the meeting invite with the agenda in there the morning of. So you get ping from me the night before, you get ping from me the morning of, so you know I'm coming. And then if even if you don't respond to it, I still use it to guide the conversation. Because you ever walked into a meeting with a mental agenda of how you want to see something go, and about 5 minutes in, they ask you that random ass question that takes you down the rabbit hole for the next 45 minutes? Without an agenda, you better be pretty damn smooth to be able to pull that one back on track. With an agenda, you don't have to be smooth at all. So you start, hey, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. By the way, here's a small nugget too. Don't ask them, is this still a good time? When somebody picks up the phone for a scheduled call, don't say, is this still a good time? Why would you give them that out, right? But what you can say is, do we still have 30 minutes? Do you have a hard stop at 1 o'clock? Because if you do, all right, that means I do want to know that, because that means your brain's moving in a different direction at around 1:50, 1:55. So you start going back to the agenda. Thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Do we still have 30 minutes here? Do you have a hard stop at 1 o'clock? Fantastic. You know what? I sent out the agenda yesterday. I'm sure you probably didn't get a chance to take a look at it, but I just want to make sure that we get the most out of our time together here. Here's a few things I want to make sure that we cover. What else would you like to make sure we add here? And then they add it, whatever. And then you start mowing through the agenda. And then when that random question comes up, you can actually say, hey, you know what? That's a great question. Would you mind if we got through our original agenda here that we both agreed upon, and if there's time left at the end of the presentation, I'll be happy to address that. My experience is 60, 70% of the time that, yeah, you know what, John, let's stay on track. The other 30, 40% of the time, if whatever they just brought up is more important than what you were there to talk about, they'll tell you, right? So that small, I have it as a template in Outlook. I use Outlook, so I use a template in Outlook, the signature file. It's called Shared Agenda. I send that out for every meeting. So there's 2 main tips, right? And going back to staying on the thread of expectation setting. On the back end of a meeting, this is my absolute favorite. This is one of my other absolute favorite tips, which is I call it the summary email. So what you do is, after you and I have a conversation, okay? Say you're trying to sell to me. It's not that I'm lying to you, okay? It's just that as soon as we get off the phone here, my boss comes in and changes my priorities. Or your competition comes in and starts talking to me about something totally different. And so now, 2 or 3 weeks later, you could be selling to something that's completely irrelevant at this point. And for you to remind me what we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I barely remember what I said 5 minutes ago, forget about 5 days ago, right? So, but if you have it in writing, now you have something to hold me accountable. All right, so now the way it works is this. Again, and by the way, you have to let them know this one is coming. If you don't let them know this one's coming, the response rates drop through the floor. But you say, hey, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate it. This is kind of closing out the meeting. All right. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. There's some next steps and action items here. Before I go ahead and do that, though, I'm just going to briefly summarize what I was able to gain from our conversation. I'm going to send it over to you in a quick email right after this call. Would you do me a favor and just take a look at it and email me back to let me know if it's all accurate and if I missed anything? So again, you have to let them know it's coming. Then once you get off the phone, take all your notes and scrub them up, and do not write a book here. All right. This is not your chance to, reiterate your value proposition or talk about how great your company is. This is purely to confirm what you heard from them. So what it reads is, and again, I have a template and outlook for this. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it today. Below is a brief summary of what I was able to gain from our conversation. Could you do me a favor and email me back to let me know if it's all accurate and if I missed anything? Your current situation's this. Your timeline's this. Your priorities are this. Here's the competition that we're looking at. Your the process is this. The 5, 6, 7 bullet points there. Mainly timeline and priorities. Those are the two key factors, right? And then you send it over to them and you try to get that, yes, John, that's accurate. Because now once you have that, now you can be direct with your follow-up and not pushy or rude. So for instance, say they say yes to that and you have a next step on Friday, and Friday comes and goes and lo and behold, they don't show up. Right? Well, instead of Monday touching base, checking in, so the weekend went type of bullshit, you just take that email, fire it back to them and say, hey, what's the best way to get 15 minutes back on your calendar so we can reset expectations based on what we both agreed upon here? Again, nice professional way. Right? And this also ties to going over somebody's head without pissing them off. All right? There's another challenge. So here's another tip for you. I'm a big fan of the top-down approach, all right? Going after the executive when I'm prospecting, getting referred down, and then spending my time there. Because it's just way easier to go back up if you need to after you've come down than it is to start at the bottom and go all the way up. I'm not saying bottom up is not valid and it doesn't work. It's just a lot easier to go top down. So with that top-down approach, you go after said executive or whoever, say who can I have a conversation with? And then you have that. So say Sarah's the executive and Sarah refers you to Jim and you have this really good conversation with Jim. Now, what you do is you summarize that conversation. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for your time. I'm going to briefly summarize our conversation. And by the way, now you don't even have to ask to go back up to Sarah if you don't want to. This is a courtesy call. Hey, you know what, and Jim, since Sarah was the one who referred me to you in the first place, I'm just going to keep her up to date on this conversation. Cool. Hey, Sarah, thanks so much for your referral to Jim. I really appreciate it. Hey, we had a really good conversation. Here's a few things that we talked about. Anything you'd like to add from an executive standpoint? Right? So it's a nice professional way of going back up and keeping Sarah up to date on the conversation. And then if Sarah goes dark on you, or I'm sorry, if Jim goes dark on you, which I think is one of the hardest things to do in sales is getting somebody to respond when they've gone dark. But if he does, now you just can go back up to Sarah and say, hey, Sarah, I'm not sure what happened to Jim. Hopefully everything's okay. But based on your priorities and your timeline here, I thought I'd reach out to you to make sure that we still moved in the right direction. So, what would you suggest I do? So it's a nice, easy way of going back up over somebody's head without pissing them off. Okay. Another small tip on that one is when somebody is not responsive to you, specifically somebody below the power line, going over their head just because they're not responsive, just be careful with that, right? Because ideally you need to separate the conversation here. If you're having tactical features and functions, execution-oriented conversations here, you have to have a different reason for reaching out to the executive level here, because otherwise you're going to piss off both people. But if Jim's gone dark on you for whatever reason and you're trying to reconnect and get Jim to call you back, there's 2 tips for you to try to get somebody who's gone dark on you to come back and at least respond. First one is I call up Jim and I leave a voicemail. And again, sounding concerned that everything's okay, because I've done it before where I've ripped into that person and they were in the hospital or some problem with their family and I'm the asshole. So instead of that, hey, Jim, you know what? I haven't heard back from you about a couple weeks here based on what we talked about. And since, your priorities and your timeline you outlined here in the summary email are pretty aggressive, if I don't hear back from you within about 24 hours, I'm going to go ahead and give Sarah a call just to make sure that things stay on track here. So effectively what you're doing to Jim is you're letting him know that you're going to go over his head, and you're giving him a warning, and you give him about 24 hours. Usually I get a super high response rate on that one. You know what, John, sorry, I've been busy, whatever. The other thing to do here is, and this is a tip to get somebody to respond back to you after they've gone dark. And it replaces the bullshit email of the, stuck under a rock, the breakup email, which is, 1, 2, or 3. Are you really interested? You're just super busy right now. You're not interested and you want me to leave you alone. Or 3, you're stuck under a rock or getting eaten by a freaking alligator or some bullshit thing there or whatever. That worked 3-4 years ago. It's not working anymore, right? Because it's gotten overplayed. A replacement for that one, and this will get overplayed in the next few years here, but the way it works is this: get that summary email, somebody, and say Friday you're supposed to have a follow-up meeting. Friday comes and goes, and lo and behold, nobody shows up. Well, then Monday, take that summary email, reply all to it. Hey, not sure what happened here. Not sure what happened on Friday. When do you want to reconnect? You do your typical follow-up, right? Not sure if you're still interested. Hey, is this something whatever. Do that probably 4 or 5 times over the course of a committed follow-up, by the way. And this is not just just a brief little send me information conversation. This is like, it had some substance to it. So after the 4th or 5th email, maybe after a week or 2 of that committed date being missed by them and no response, you take that same email and keep replying all to it, by the way, because you want to show them that you've come after them 4 or 5 times. Reply to all to it the 5th time. Erase the original subject line, and all you put in the original subject line is, did I lose you? That's it. So did I lose you, ? And then when they open up the email, the only thing that they see in their email is that. You don't try to write anything. It's just your subject line and the other 5 emails that you've tried to send them. I get about a 90% response rate on that one, and I get at least 2 or 3 emails a week from reps saying, John, check this out. This client's gone dark on me forever, and they finally responded using the approach. Really appreciate it. So use that one up now before it gets overplayed. That's one of my favorites. And it leads to another tip of mine, which is a defined next step. I think the most important thing you can get at any stage of the sales process is a defined next step scheduled on the calendar. And what the way I leverage this is, it's actually based off of something else in that book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, which is called the rule of reciprocity. And the rule of reciprocity is all about how, as human beings, we're all bound, even driven to repay debts, right? So if somebody asks you for something, there's a fleeting moment that they actually feel obligated to give you something in return. And if you ask for it right then and there, and it's easy, and it makes sense, it's usually pretty easy for them to give you. So let's talk about a defined next step. So for instance, when somebody says, send me information, a get for send me information is a scheduled call on the calendar to review that information. And so this is the way, first of all, small sidebar tip on send me information: what, when, why. What information would you like to see? When would you like to see it, and why? For people who are genuinely interested in information, those are actually legit questions to answer, and that should be pretty easy. For those that are not very interested in your information, those are very hard questions to answer. So after I go through the what, when, why process, then I say, great, happy to send over that information. When do you want to schedule a brief 15-minute call so we can follow up on that information and see if it makes sense for us to take the next steps? Next week. When next week? Friday's good. And now this is what you do. You say, okay, great. You know what? Why don't you? Actually, you know what? You got your calendar in front of you, and you got to say it with a really nice tone of voice, right? So, hey, you got your calendar in front of you, and then shut up. Wait for it. There'll be that little awkward pause where they realize that you got them. Because if they say no to, everybody's got their calendar in front of you, right? In front of them when they're on the phone. So if they say no to that, they are blatantly lying to your face. And if you ever do that to a VP of sales, by the way, you'll actually hear the smirk on the other end of the phone being like, oh, damn, I wish my reps would do this shit, right? So, so try to pin them down for that defined next step, even if it has to be like a month or 2 out, because at least it's on the calendar and it gives you a chance, okay? By the way, here's another small nugget as it relates to that, which is I'll let people know, for instance, so that was for send me information, scheduled follow-up call. Another one is a defined next step is defining a next step and getting a defined next step on the calendar for a decision. So for instance, you say you're sending them references and they wanted references. Fantastic. I put decision meetings on people's calendars. So they say, we're going to make a decision by Friday. We'll get back to you. Fantastic. What time do you want to talk on Friday? Friday afternoon, we'll probably get back to you. Hey, you know what? Why don't we just throw something on the calendar now so I can get a yes or a no from you either way? By the way, I say that. I want to let them know it's 100% okay for me for you to tell me no. So why don't we throw something on the calendar so I can get a yes or a no from you either way, and we don't have to play chase. I literally say that word. So we don't have to play chase. Letting you know we're going to play chase, all right? And, so if you don't show up on Friday, which you probably aren't going to, as far as you just telling me you're going to get back to me on Friday, well, then what do? I call you on Monday. I send you an email. I email you. I social stalk. I send you an email. I follow up, right? Because that's my job. And I stalk the shit out of you because that is my job. And you're going to avoid, you're going to delete, you're going to avoid, you're going to delete. The problem is that my motivation to put money in my pocket is way stronger than yours is to avoid me. So eventually I'm going to get through. So, and it's going to be weird. So can we just do this the easy? Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is we throw something on the calendar, and if it needs to be rescheduled, we can. The hard way is we play chase. You choose. Right? Now, I don't go through that whole dialogue with the client, but hey, all I say is, hey, why don't we just throw something on the calendar now so we don't have to play chase? Use that one. Some other ones here. Meetings. All right. We're talking about meetings and having those meetings. Have a structured way of how you take your notes. I know this one sounds simple, but it makes a huge difference. So two nuggets on this one. One is develop your checklist for your meetings. What are all the things that you need to do prior to a meeting, and put it together in a checklist that you need to do to put yourself in the best position possible to be successful during that call. So for instance, some of the things that are on my checklist is literally have cut and paste the about us. I use Evernote to take all my notes. And so one of the things is I cut and paste the about us of their website into my notes right there, so I can just look up immediately. Obviously, the people who you're meeting with and their titles and their background should be on your checklist. Any recent news and events from the client is on mine. An agenda for the call is on mine. Goals for the call, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, how important goal setting is. And then any specific use cases or case studies I can bring to the table. So that is my core checklist that I go through, which leads into my notes and how I take notes. I take a very structured approach of how I take my notes. It's always in the same format, so I can just kind of go through and fill it out the way I want to fill it out. And I can bounce around, but it helps highlight the things I know I need to get. All right. So so do a structure, a template for how you take your notes. And by the way, if you're pinning all this stuff together, you have an agenda on the front end, you have a structured way that you take your notes throughout, and then you have a summary email that flows right from that. So now you got this nice tight little process of how you're going to manage meetings and show how you differentiate yourself, right? And here's a tip on that. The way, a lot of our products and services are being commoditized in so many ways. And we can keep fighting the fight, the value fight, those type of things, right? Which please do. Please keep, showing value. But I also know that you can differentiate yourself purely based on the way that you manage the sales process. So how professional you are at how you manage helps you stand out over the competition. So the preparation you go walking into it, the structure that you have in that meeting, the defined next steps and everything else. I've gotten a lot of business just purely based on that alone, right? So elevate your game on your process. Your company probably has one, but put together one of your own that shows that you know what you're talking about and kind of fits into your workflow, okay? Let's talk about what else. Let's see. Oh, messaging. Here's one. How to come up with messaging. Easiest way to come up with messaging, and your number one differentiator, by the way, whoever's listening to this, when you are prospecting, it's really hard to differentiate yourself, right? Because everybody kind of sounds the same. It's like, oh, we're the leading provider of, and blah, 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 whatever. And that's, that's kind of a numbers game. You're going to have to play the numbers game with that approach and just try to trip over somebody that has your need right then and there. But having a reason and coming up with messaging that resonates, the easiest way to do that, your number one differentiator, is your customers. your customers, and not just your customers, the results you drive for your customers. And that's how we create attention grabbers. So instead of elevator pitches, which are fucking horrible in so many ways, attention grabbers. What can you say in the first 5 to 15 seconds of a conversation to get somebody to go, all right, tell me more. How do you do that? And the easiest way to do that is to look at the bottom of a case study and look at the result you drove for that client and turn that into an attention grabber. So now I can say, hey, we showed this company in your industry how to drive these type of results, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. That's what I call your attention grabber. It's the easiest way to come up with them. If you can have some metrics in there, fantastic. If not, then just try to make it sound impactful for what you did for them. And try to stay away from words or phrases like, on average, our clients see a 30% increase or up to a 50%. No. We showed this client in your industry how to do this, and you fit that profile. Let's have that conversation. Okay? Which leads to another tip, which is how to leave a voicemail. When you're calling, make sure you have a reason. Again, the reason for my call is, but then also make sure that when you're leaving a message, there's some structure to it. So the structure of our messages are, you start with that powerful introduction, then you give them the reason for your call, which should be short and concise and direct. And then you tell them what you want, call back, referral, something like that. And last but not least, you leave your contact information at the end of voicemails. You don't start with, hi, this is John Barrows from J Barrows Consulting. Because 90% of people, when they hear that, they hang up. Because either I know you and I think I know you, or I don't and I don't care. And so what we do is we start with, hey, Bill, the reason for my call today is we've actually just shown this company in your industry how to drive these type of results, and you fit a very similar profile to that. I'd love to have a conversation. Could you call me back at 617-529-72? I'm not going to get my full number out there. But if you could call me back at that, I'd appreciate it. By the way, this is John Barrows of J Barrows Consulting, 617-529. So what it does is it forces them to listen to the value proposition. All right. And so you might, back it up and like, I didn't even know your company did that. And the other thing there is, if you screw up halfway through, you can hang up and they have no idea who you are. All right. So try that one out. It's hard because it is so ingrained in us to say, hi, this is John Barrows hi, this is John Barrows of J Barrows Consulting. But man, once you break that, it makes all the difference in the world. So I'm going to cut now. Jared asked, cut down to a couple of questions here. What's wrong with most elevator pitches? Historical elevator pitches. They're way too long. They're too general. And usually they're all about us, and they're just super cheesy, right? It's like, we are the leading provider of XYZ solutions, and we help you go better, faster, cheaper, whatever, right? And usually from a length standpoint, they're way more than 30 seconds for the most part if you didn't take a breath. Whereas attention grabbers, the goal there is to say something that'll get them to say, tell me more. And I'm going to go back to some old school stuff here. Glengarry Glen Ross, all right? If you haven't watched the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, don't watch the movie. It's a depressing ass movie. But go on YouTube and watch the best 8 minutes of Alec Baldwin's entire career. And type in there, and because you'll see in there, he talks about ABC always be closing, but he also talks about AIDA. And that is, I looked it up, that is the actual fundamental process of sales. Some guy by the name of St. Elmo Lewis came up with it in 1898. He said, these are the 4 mental stages we all need to go through before we buy something. First, something needs to get our attention, then we have to be interested, then we have to have a desire, then we have to move to act. So if you think of attention in today's world, we literally have seconds to get someone's attention. That's why the elevator pitch fails when making calls and outreach, all right? So try to be as specific as possible when talking about a component of your solution that aligns with the person that you're reaching out to, and that's the best way to develop attention grabbers. Connor, what's up, man? What was your favorite attention grabber in the MSP sales? I didn't have one, man. I had my elevator pitch, and hopefully you guys have seen that one blasting out there where I go, I have Thrive Networks outsourced IT support. I didn't have this training. I mean, I took this training, but I didn't really zone in on that. Now I'm very zoned in on that messaging. My now favorite would be something like, well, we showed this company in your industry how to, reduce their infrastructure by XYZ percentage and migrate to the cloud with no hassles and educate all their employees, something like that. That would be my attention grabber for these days if I was still in the MSP world. All right. Let's see. I think I got one more here. Yeah, don't sell meetings, sell time. Okay. When you ask for a meeting, anybody's like, oh, that's an hour to them and it's usually not good. So quantify what you're asking for. I would actually avoid 15 minutes. I know I keep saying it, but it's a habit. 15 minutes has gotten a little bit overplayed. So many people are asking for 15. So it's almost a trigger now to kind of roll your eyes. So I don't know, ask for 20, ask for 30, ask for 10. I don't care. Just pick a different number. But the key is quantifying what you're asking for. When I say I'd like to meet with you, you think, oh, hour, waste of time. If I say, hey, look, I just need 10 minutes of your time so I can ask you these questions, quantify it. All right. Cool. Well, that actually, I only got through probably 7 or 8 of them, those are my favorites, but maybe we'll do another one of these sessions if you guys got some value out of this. It is coming up on 1 o'clock. I do have a meeting with a client I got to jump on board here with now. So look, everybody, make it a great week. Again, try to make somebody smile today. Try to make a difference in somebody's life. Do sales the right way. Don't be douchey about it. I always say this is the #1 profession on the planet when done right. It's the worst when done wrong. All right. So let's do it right. Let's make it happen. Make it a great week.